Hi, and we're back in part 2, and we're going to pick up where we left off. Now, I have just introduced the current Seligman positive psychology theory, PERMA. So now we're going to explore this theory further, and then we're going to consider a couple additional theories, and then we're going to consider some of the benefits, obstacles, and some ways to enhance one's well-being. So let's get right into it. If positive psychology was to understand and facilitate living a full life, a full and fulfilling life, then a multidimensional conceptualization of well-being was going to be required, which did not depend on happiness as the single outcome variable. The elements of this multidimensional construct had to be things that contribute to well-being, were actively chosen for their own sake, and were measured relatively independent of each other. PERMA theory of well-being proposes that overall well-being depends upon the combination of our statuses in 5 domains. Now remember, from part 1, they're based, PERMA is P-E-R-M-A. Positive emotions is the P, and positive emotions such as joy, excitement, and contentment. Engagement in absorbing activities like sports or skilled work is the E. The R, relationships which provide the experiences of attachment, support, loving, and being loved. The M, meaning. Meaning derived from serving something bigger than ourselves, like at a sports club, a community event, charity work, organizations, political party, or religion. These give us the feeling that life is valuable and worth living. The A, accomplishments, including completing tasks, reaching goals, and achieving success in work or leisure activities. Accomplishments give us feelings of mastery and achievement. Now, you can imagine, just by hearing those sort of key elements, that there must be some benefits that we gain from well-being. Well, the 5 aspects of PERMA well-being are associated with a range of positive benefits. And this is just a summary of some of those benefits. Positive emotions, the experience of frequent positive emotions has multiple benefits. Notably, as you would imagine, if you are filled with positive emotions majority of the time, you will experience better health and longevity, better relationships and work performance. With the engagement, you will experience frequent engagement in absorbing skilled activities is associated with a flow experience. Now, the flow experience we're going to talk about in another chapter. And with this flow experience, better performance and better satisfaction in things like education, in work environments. Relationships, the R, having close, confiding relationships with family and friends is associated with greater happiness and better health. And that's going to be a common factor in these elements. The M, or meaning, purpose in life, correlates with a wide range of indices of well-being and quality of life. And the A, accomplishments of valued goals, is associated with positive emotions and subjective well-being. Now, Seligman and his colleagues were looking at this well-being and conceptualizing it and found that there's more than one way to conceptualize well-being. There are many ways of conceptualizing well-being besides PERMA theory. The following 2 we're going to look at are widely used in positive psychology research. The hedonic, or the subjective approach, defines happiness and the good life in terms of pleasure seeking and pain avoidance. It's a subjective measure, so it's based on what you think and feel. Basically, how happy are you? And how happy do you feel? That's a subjective, my own personal expression of what that means to me. The second type is the eudaimonic, or the psychological tradition. In contrast to the hedonic, it defines happiness and the good life in terms of achieving one's full potential, being true to our authentic self. And that's somewhat more objective. Our authentic self is something that's out there as a goal. And that is something we may strive for, and therefore it's something that we aim for, and it makes it somewhat objective, but it's connected to us. The hedonic and eudaimonic traditions may be traced back to early Greek philosophers in the 4th century BC. In modern psychology, the hedonic tradition is reflected in research on subjective well-being, and that was pioneered by Denner. The eudaimonic tradition is reflected in research on psychological well-being, and it's been championed by Riff. The balance of positive and negative emotions and satisfaction with life are the key elements of subjective well-being. Psychological well-being comprises 6 components. Now, these are components from psychology, but it's applied to positive psychology. Autonomy, environmental mastery, personal growth, positive relationships, purpose in life, and 7, self-acceptance. The benefits of positive affect and factors associated with experiencing of it occupy an important place within positive psychology, and much of the remainder of this chapter is going to focus on this element. Social well-being, quality of life, and flourishing are 3 other ways of conceptualizing well-being. And let's explore these just a bit. The social well-being refers to positive states associated with optimum functioning in one's social network and community. So those times where we are interacting with our friends and we feel really connected, we feel we are integrated and interrelated with one another and are supporting and helping one another, this is the positive states that are associated with optimal functioning. Quality of life, which is the second, is an individual's perception of their position in life in context of the culture in which they live and with reference to their own goals, expectations, and standards. And then flourishing, this means living within the optimal range of human functioning. There's too much and too little. So in the optimal range, optimal range of human functioning. Each of the elements of PERMA well-being has long-term benefits in one or more domain. For example, mood, health, relationships, or work. The experience of frequent positive emotions is associated with better health, longevity, relationships, and occupational adjustment. Now, I had mentioned in the intro, we're going to look at a couple of other theories. I'm going to look at one that is the broadening and build theory of positive emotions, and this was done by researcher Barbara Fredrickson. Barbara Fredrickson explains that her broaden and build theory explains how positive emotions enhance well-being. Now, one of the things she noted is that negative emotions start to narrow our thought-action repertoire. That is the TAR. Thought-action repertoire is how available are different opportunities, different options, thought actions. I could do this, I could do that, I could do this. That repertoire is narrowed when we have negative emotions. We can't come up with as many alternatives to solve a problem. Positive emotions broaden momentary TAR. They lead to new thoughts about wide variety of possible courses of action that would potentially take to solve our issues. Now, she introduced the term broadening, as is in the title of her theory. Broadening is this broadening of momentary thought action repertoire creates opportunities to build long-lasting personal resources. And this is if we're going to broaden, we're going to build. So therefore, growth, this is what fosters the personal growth, is this opportunities to build with new lasting resources. It also fosters personal growth and transformation by creating positive or adaptive spirals of emotions. So what's really interesting about that is that through these more TAR opportunities, we get more opportunity to find ways to succeed, and that can spiral in a positive, broadening way. So these works that we could improve on, things like art, science, social relationships, are resources, and they enhance life and bring more joy. Fredrickson went on to say that causes of positive emotion, an important strand of research on the causes of well-being, has focused specifically on positive affectivity or happiness. Much of this section is therefore on the causes of happiness. So if we were to take that point, a cause of happiness, and therefore what might that mean? Well, the researcher, and I'm going to stumble all over her last name, and I apologize to her and to you for mispronouncing, Sonia Lyubomirsky's theory of sustainable happiness. Now, this is a theory that I strongly support. I bought this book that she wrote many years ago. Sonia, following a review of available evidence, proposed that individual differences in our happiness or positive effectiveness in our own lives are determined by three factors: genetic, circumstances, and intentional activities. Now, what she did is she looked at genetic factors account for 50% of individual differences in happiness. Circumstances account for 10% of individual differences in happiness. The good news? Intentional activities account for 40% of individual differences in happiness. There is considerable latitude to enhance well-being for ourselves if 40% of individual differences in positive emotions are under personal control. That's encouraging. And that's why I was saying earlier that it's teachable and learnable. Now, one of the elements that's important here is that twin studies, now we'll come back to all of this, genetic factors, which is at that 50%, set an upper limit to how much happiness we usually experience. This level is often described as what is known as the happiness set point. Genetic factors probably will influence a number of the major personality traits because there is about a 50% heritability. So some examples of personality traits that could be affected by this: extroversion is the personality trait most strongly associated with positive emotions. Emotional stability, conscientiousness, and agreeableness have weaker but significant correlations with happiness and extroversion. Now, I mentioned that circumstances were 10%. And what would circumstances be? There's a number of things that can fall within circumstances, and I'm going to mention them and just briefly describe them. So environmental circumstances account for about the 10% of individual differences in happiness. And here's the kind of things that can be included in that 10%. Supportive relationships, marriage, kinship relationships, and friendships increase happiness by providing the social support. Education and employment increases positive emotions by giving meaning to life, by providing opportunities for engagement and skilled activity, and by providing wealth. Health increases happiness up to a point where basic material needs are met. After that, even large increases in wealth do not lead to large, long-lasting increases in happiness. Interesting. Religious practice is associated with happiness, especially in highly religious cultures. Religion may be associated with happiness because it provides meaning to life, a healthy lifestyle, social support, rituals that support coping, things like prayer, meditation, singing, sacraments, and the like. Leisure activities, including sports, dancing, art, music, reading, film, volunteer charity work, vacationing, just resting, can contribute to short-term experiences of positive emotion. Leisure may also enhance well-being by meeting some needs for autonomy, mastery, meaning, affiliation, and the need to recover from the demands of work or life pressures. What about the impact on our health? Well, the absence of severe illnesses, severe pain, painful, debilitating, or life-limiting illnesses can reduce long-term well-being, but high degree of adaptation occurs to most other illnesses and disabilities. The impact on freedom. Well, individuals are happier in free societies. That is, affluent, stable democracies devoid of political oppression, social inequality, military conflicts, corruption, and with fair tax structures and social welfare systems. A pleasant living environment. People are happier if they live in pleasant physical environments with adequate housing, close to amenities, access to green spaces, and far from air and sound pollution associated with traffic and industry. But here's the good news. The remaining 40%, intentional activities, whatever choices, plans, and decisions we make, influence our happiness. Now, Sonia points it out in her book. Thus, the key to happiness is not in changing your genetic makeup. It's not possible. And it's not from changing your circumstances. Seeking wealth or attractiveness or better colleagues usually is very impractical to be able to do. So this is informing us that 40% of our happiness is in our control to create opportunities. Okay, we know there's good reasons to want to pursue well-being and happiness, but are there obstacles to get in our way of achieving happiness? Well, of course there are, and we probably have run up against some of them. So obstacles to happiness, the extent to which environmental factors and intentional activities constrain the experience of positive emotions, is affected by genetically determined, and that's individual, our set point, the tendency to habituate positive events, the hedonic treadmill. And we're going to go through these. I'm going to break them down a little bit in just a moment. I'm just highlighting them. The tendency for positive emotions to be weaker and more fleeting than negative ones. This is known as negativity bias. And then the tendency to make demoralizing upward social comparisons and the tendency to make inaccurate affective forecasts about sorts of things that will lead to increased positive emotions. So let's look at these individually and break them down a bit. We adapt to positive life events, so they no longer make us happy. The hedonic treadmill Brickman and Campbell proposed genetically determined happiness set point. The happiness set point is like a thermostat. When we strive to get more things to make us feel long-term happiness, inevitably we adapt. And this motivates us to strive for even more. And then the process of adaptation repeats again and again. This is why the process of striving and adapting is referred to as the hedonic treadmill. You can just keep going and keep going. Now, the second one we'll touch on is the negativity bias. We focus more on negative than positive things, and this reduces our happiness. Bad is stronger than good. Roy Baumeister, in the Bad is Stronger Than Good, concluded that a vast body of research shows that we tend to focus on and remember and adapt more slowly to negative than to positive things. Now, it's also interesting to note what evolutionary advantage has there been, if any. From an evolutionary perspective, this had survival value. Survivors always remember to respond adaptively to negative events and continually search for more positive experiences. Author Rick Hanson, the author of Buddha's Brain, says we have we have to actively appreciate positive experiences and weave them into the fabric of our brain, because the human brain is Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. Social comparisons. Now let's look at them. When we compare ourselves to others who are better off than we are, it reduces well-being. Social comparison involves comparing the self with others in terms of valued characteristics such as possessions that we might have, wealth, appearance, or achievements. Before modern civilization, social comparison was adaptive because it motivated our ancestors to aspire to be the best in their social group at something, anything. And this was a realistic goal in their lifetime because social groups were so small and had similar resources. In contemporary society, with comparison with electronic media, social comparison is not always adaptive. Very few can compete with media images. Online social groups are vast, and there are major inequalities in resources available to individuals. Now there's the two versions, the upward social comparison and downward. So upward social comparison contrasts reduced well-being. So when we contrast ourselves to others who are better off than we are, this reduces well-being because we focus on what we lack. Downward social comparison, the contrast increases well-being. When we contrast ourselves to others who are worse off than we are, this increases well-being because we become aware of how well off we are in comparison. Now, the other component we had touched on was the affective forecasting. And we're really not good at predicting situations that will make us happy. Daniel Gilbert at Harvard University found that we are poor at predicting situations that will make us happy due to some basic errors. And we're going to look at these basic errors. The first one we'll look at is impact bias. We overestimate the strength and duration of future positive emotions because we don't take into account the hedonic adaptation. We forget that more money or more possessions aren't going to lead to long-lasting happiness. Secondly, focalism. We selectively focus on the positive and the negative and neglect the negative. We may imagine that work promotion will bring us great wealth and happiness. Yahoo! We neglected the negative emotion due to the increased responsibilities that will be on our shoulders and the limited power or resources to discharge any of these and have no impediments And then the third one is presentism. We predict that the future will be like the present. On a cold winter day, we predict that a month-long sunshine holiday would make us feel warmer and therefore happier. On the third week of this vacation, we feel unhappy because we no longer are cold and we need to be warmed up. In fact, we are finding the heat a little oppressive. So, okay, we see that there are some obstacles. What would we do to improve well-being? So in order to look at what we might be able to do to enhance our sense of well-being, based on the material covered in this chapter, we can optimize our sense of well-being by doing the activities listed in box 1.4. This is in your textbook. Enhance personal well-being. So, positive emotions. Do things that make you feel positive emotions and savor them. We're going to explore savoring in chapter 4. Hedonic treadmill. When you find things that make you feel happy, vary the ways that you do them and appreciate how good they make you feel. By doing things the same way all the time, we get used to them, and then we get used to them, so we have to do more. We get used to them, we have to do more, we get used to them. There's the hedonic treadmill. Social comparisons. If we look upward on the social comparisons, when making these upward social comparisons, make them with people you can identify with and who are people you can aspire to be like. Don't compare yourselves to the Joneses or to the media idols, or you'll be disappointed that you can't seem to keep up with them all the time. If we consider these social comparisons downward, when making downward social comparisons, focus on how much more you have accomplished than some others have. Don't dwell on the possibility that you could lose all the accomplishments and become more like them. Dwell, if you will, on your successes. Negativity bias. Expect to get small increases in happiness from large gains and successes, and large reductions in happiness from small losses and failures. Now, we did touch on, and we will explore this a little further, effective forecasting. Now, there are 3 elements to this, 3 different versions, and we'll get to that. When we forecast, how will we feel if we do something to make you feel better in the future? Ask yourself, what evidence do you have from past experience that will make you feel as good as you imagine for as long as you imagine? And if you are neglecting to take into account other circumstances that may occur that would neutralize these good feelings. Education and work. Finding flow by using skills that are intrinsically pleasing for tasks that are challenging and absorbing. Now, we're going to look at flow in chapter 4. Relationships. Well, prioritize spending time with your family, your friends, and making these relationships strong and lasting. And we're going to be looking at relationships and building strategies in chapter 8. Spirituality is another way that you can grow more well-being and positive emotions by engaging in religious or spiritual practices. Meaning, goals, and values, purpose, if you will, setting and pursuing valued goals that are not materialistic and that give you life meaning and purpose. That we'll be looking at in chapter 2. Environmentally, well, people find that secure physical and financial safety and comfort for yourself and your family, but don't get on the hedonic treadmill of consumerism. Live near green spaces for natural beauty and in an environment where there is pleasing music and art. And periodically, some fine weather. Health has a big impact. Maintaining a healthy lifestyle has a huge impact on overall happiness. Recreation, practice mindful meditation or progressive muscle relaxation. Now we're going to do mindfulness and meditation in chapter 4 and relaxation in chapter 7. Rest, relax, and take a holiday in moderation. Do cooperative and or absorbing recreational activities with groups of friends to create flow. There is a danger that positive psychology as a movement may inadvertently convey messages that most people are unhappy and need positive psychology to help them find happiness. I mean, this just is not true. International surveys consistently show that most people are moderately happy. In the emerging area of neuroscience, of well-being, an important separate neural network that underpins the motivational process of wanting something that is expected to bring pleasure and liking something that is experienced as pleasurable. Well, I know this has been a fairly large first chapter, and I'll try and make efforts to not inundate you with too heavy a load, but at the same time, this is the content of positive psychology, and it's been our introduction. Next week, we're going to look at goals and strengths, two very important concepts in positive psychology in an effort to live a good life, positive experiences, and personal growth. So we'll see you next week into content for week 2. Bye, everybody, and see you then.